I would want to tell you a story about the time I was a man named Wayne Morrison 50 years ago. It was the early 1970s, and I was 17. I had taken medication for something. I can't remember the specific name of the illness, but I was asked to a party. When I got there, there were lots of drinks and other things going on, and the men present were a little older than myself. I started drinking, and I can't say for sure when I passed out. I went from enjoying my drink to stumbling over an overwhelming amount of background noise in the blink of an eye. I never truly felt that it was a tunnel, even if I may have used the term tunnel before. It was a seemingly never-ending blackness, but not in a scary sense. As I accelerated onward, I became aware of a light ahead of me. As I approached the light, I became aware that I was flying over a field of flowers. These flowers were extraordinary in size. Some could have stood 10, 12, or even 50 feet tall. I heard them all chatting to each other. When I say communicating, I do not mean that they were speaking a language. They were talking to me in some sort of conversation, and I was talking to them. Everything seemed to be moving along smoothly. Being an earthling, I should have been concerned by now, but I wasn't. While I was flying over this terrain, something pulled me toward a location where a distant light appeared. As it got closer and closer, this far-off light got brighter and brighter until it was directly in front of me. I couldn't quite place it, but I sensed a familiarity that made me think we were friends. The light was not a body, yet it may have possessed some slightly humanoid traits. The presence instantaneously imparted to me a plethora of knowledge. I should certainly make one thing clear. Communication amongst people here is quite different from that of this place. When we say one thing, we inadvertently infer another using what we believe to be our language. I was experiencing real-time communication where my feelings and ideas were completely incorporated into the message. I asked the one thing that had been bothering me since I was confident I could get my questions addressed right then. My purpose for being here is not this. Does life have a purpose? Just being with them gave me a rush of love. What I mean is that I mean a different type of love, not the same kind that I've always felt here or that other people might feel. Since this is the kind of love that knows everything, it was incredible to experience it truly since, I guess, that's what I wanted to hear. Whether or not there are other intelligent creatures in the universe was another question I had. I cannot for the life of me figure out how I got carried away. Other than knowing I was moving fast, there was no sensation. I don't think the term rapid fits this situation. I was taken to far-off civilizations where I could closely examine them. Some of these seemed rather old, but not all of them did. Subsequently, I returned. After a while, I was taken to a completely dark room. Again, I had no fear whatsoever of any of this. It seemed so natural. I saw something that looked like a tablet spinning in space. The tablet suddenly froze, revealing the course of human history to me. I know that seems stupid, but I did it. I saw it all from the start to the finish. I was processing all of this information so quickly that it had to have happened in a flash. I believed that I understood it. I became aware of my partial involvement in this process. I had to find a method to let them know how unhappy I was, since my worst worry was that they would send me back home. I don't know who was speaking to me at the moment, but it was clear that the initial light presence or others were telling me to return. I was being stubborn and essentially refused to go, despite the fact that I had a valid excuse. Suddenly, and this is really amazing, I was surrounded by a great number of these angelic creatures. My fans began to swoon over me. I knew I had to turn around. They sang in a totally impromptu style that was unlike anything I had ever heard. I've performed in the past on stage and in the studio, but this was not your normal musical. It was like they were creating the music live rather than just playing it. It echoed on mental, spiritual, and bodily dimensions. I'm not sure how to describe it later, because I've never heard it before or after. I knew that was the right thing to do. When I finally made it back to where I had started, I found myself in an apartment bathroom with a few men I didn't know too well. I looked for a razor blade since I thought I would eventually need to go back there. I felt like cutting my wrists. I know that sounds ominous and grim, but that wasn't the motivation behind my return to that location. Then suddenly, a booming, deep voice said, "No! Hey guys, he's in here," someone shouted from the bathroom at that same moment. The next day, at the age of 17, I saw my sweetie. I gave her the rundown and filled her in on what had happened, but this was in the early 1970s, which is half a century ago, so she didn't have any prior knowledge. Nothing to base oneself on. Before you know it, nearly 18 months have passed. My spouse and I got married and had a small child together. My partner used to be my partner. We happened to catch Dr. Raymond Moody as a guest on a midday program. His most recent book was Life After Life. Their talk gave rise to the experiences described in the book, including testimonies from people who claimed to have died and then returned with remarkably identical accounts to mine. "This is it," I said, jumping from the couch to my wife. "This is something I personally experienced." I went ahead and purchased the book, and it was accurate, with a few notable exceptions. The most of the events matched my own experiences. They could be used interchangeably, basically. When the internet became widely accessible years later, I began to find recordings of other people discussing the same topics. I suddenly discovered that there are millions of us. I would say since the dawn of time. When I tell the narrative, I want to be careful not to give it any religious implications. It's not that I'm against religion. I just don't identify with any one of them. Some have even said things like, "I think that was Jesus," or "I believe that was God." I try not to include that in my story, but maybe it was one of those things. All I want to do is tell it how it was. The event was so genuine and dramatic that it has stuck with me even though I was only 17 years old at the time. It has never left me, which is a positive rather than a negative. I am becoming more and more aware of it every day as I get older. I am so grateful